Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson, and today's show is one of our series from the HR Heroes Hangout. And of course, our HR Heroes Hangout is designed, inspired by our love, affection, and enthusiasm for people who are professional practitioners or just fans of human resources. Those are our HR human resources heroes. They are around the world doing everything they can, deployed in organizations large and small, new and mature, and they are doing things that sometimes seem impossible. Our HR heroes are the ones who marshal their own expertise, enthusiasm, and talent, combine that with organizational leadership and management, find a way to also be creative and innovative. And, of course, are individuals who are focusing on surpassing their individual and the collective organizational goals, and they are also ensuring that they're joyful, that they're practicing their joyful art of their business. Because if it doesn't feel good, why are we doing it? So here we are in our HR Heroes Hangout. Now, of course, this is a show for HR heroes. It's for people who aspire to be HR heroes. It's for people, again, who just admire HR heroes. And it's a hangout, so we're not able to, in each individual show, provide sort of in-depth analysis. So that we definitely can do a lot to highlight different topics and issues and to continue to be a powerful resource for surpassing our HR goals. So again, thank you for joining me. And today we have an interesting topic. The specific episode topic today is creating a harassment-free workplace. Harassment-free workplace, the easy way to create one. So this is, again, harassment-free workplace, the easy way to create one. And the idea here is that so much of what many modern human resource heroes are dealing with stems from, is related to, in some manner, the concept of harassment or bullying. This is a global issue, and one of the things that's interesting, and I attached in the show notes at CourtneyAnderson.com for this show, I attached an international report, which I thought was really interesting. It was out of Japan, and it did an excellent job from 2013 of getting different countries' perspective on workplace bullying and harassment. This is not just an issue if you live in the U.S. or the U.K. Or Canada or, Sweden or Japan or South Korea or Germany. It's all over. And so this report that I just attached, I think, did a really good job of pulling selected information on workplace bullying and harassment from Finland and Sweden and the UK and Germany, South Korea, Japan, Canada, and the States, the U.S. So this is a global issue. Again, our HR heroes are everywhere in the world. If there's an entity that is either a for-profit or a non-profit, but it's an organization trying to get stuff done, whether that's a social goal or it's a business goal, then you need humans at some level. To the best of my knowledge, there's not an organization that's entirely non-human. There are many organizations that, of course, have different types of population distribution. Some organizations have technology and what we would call robots and things of that nature. Other organizations may have very few humans, but maybe they have other species that are part of their organization. But no matter the percentage, to the best of my knowledge, there's at least some presence of humans in organizations around the world that are trying to get stuff done. And so you have to have a way then to marshal those resources. If you have humans, you got to have a way to marshal the resources of the humans. That's what human resource heroes do. So this is a global issue. It's not just an issue in the U.S. I do lots of different education programs for specific organizations or in specific parts of the world. And of course, I am a lawyer and attorney in the U.S., and so I go into the details of how the specific laws work in the U.S. when I'm working with organizations that have questions about that. But this is our show today to sort of deal with people who are suspicious. Our entire HR Heroes Hangout show in series is all about the reality that there are amazingly passionate and effective and, of course, joyful human resource heroes around the world. But there's also a skepticism. I've shared in many of the programs that I've had the joy, honest joy, of getting out and seeing a lot of the world. Not as much as I plan to, hopefully, depending on what life provides me going forward, but I've been able to work all over the world with lots of different organizations and meet many different HR heroes. And to a person, consistently, they're interested in the field, they're constantly learning new information, they're doing self-assessments on how they can become better, they're working with their organization to determine what's the best thing that we can do to anticipate what the next challenges might be, and it's exciting. But there are other people. There are other people who don't believe. They don't believe in our HR heroes. They're actually cynics in some organizations who think, HR, they're not able to do all these things. They're not heroes. There's some people who have even tried to suggest to me that having a harassment-free workplace is not even really, feasible or possible. And that's why in the topic for this episode, in the title, it says harassment-free workplace, question mark, exclamation point, because many people have said directly to me, hey, if there are humans, there's harassment. And they make this argument. If I've got humans, I've got harassment. So the idea that I'm going to be able to have some harassment-free workplace is just a waste of time for anybody to talk about or to try to prevent not happening or to try to educate people. Because the argument is, hey, look, that's like, if you have humans, then the humans they're going to breathe. So if you have humans, they're going to harass. And that's just how it is. Actually, in fact, one of the reasons this show was moved into today's recording schedule was because I actually had a discussion with someone very recently, a person who's pretty new in their work field. So they were, in their 20s, and was sharing basically the sentiment that they had been talking to some of their friends and was sharing some of the things that are happening in their workplace or that they've observed in their workplace that they perceived as harassment. And they said, look, my friend said, hey, we're working, right? And this is what happens. Every workplace has harassment. We just have to, accept it. And that really disturbed me. It really disturbed me because it's inaccurate. And in fact, I gave, I tried to give, hopefully it was somewhat persuasive, but it certainly was very impassioned, argument that saying that a harassment-free workplace doesn't exist is that somewhat analogous to some person who grew up as a child in a very violent home, so domestic violence. So people who you talk to who come from upbringings from their earliest memory that there was violence in their home, right? Physical violence or sometimes psychological violence, abuse. If you talk to that person, they'll say things to you like, hey, but that's what everybody deals with, right? Because their perception is, that's what they dealt with in their life, so they made the totally rational and reasonable, completely reasonable conclusion that some version of this must happen at everybody's house. Not that everybody's house was exactly the same, that the exact same things happen, but that, at everybody's house there's some type of, abuse. And when you talk to them as adults or when you try to get people like that to sort of look at their thought process and understand, that's not accurate. Every single domestic organization or family, household, does not have abuse. Now, does every household have challenges? Sure. Whether it's, household chores or making sure that sometimes maybe there's financial stress or maybe people just having, a bad day or bad things happen in life, somebody loses their job, things of that nature. But is it Is it accurate that every single person who's grown up grew up in a home where they were physically assaulted, and if they weren't physically assaulted, they were verbally threatened and abused? No, it's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. And where am I getting this? I mean, look at the data internationally. Now, are there many people who grow up in homes of physical violence? Yes. Are there many people who grow up in homes of sexual violence or psychological violence? Yes. But is that everybody? No. And what I'm arguing is that people get this very distorted view of what's normal or what's expected based on their own life experience. So if you grow up in an environment of violence, you kind of think, well, everybody else must have some level of this, and that's how you view the world. That's what you expect. And you start to make rationalizations, right, lies, that, well, if this is normal, then we just all have to, sort of take it and tolerate it. And that's not accurate. It also then will potentially put them in a position when they go out as adults to make their own families where they might engage in behavior that's abusive, thinking incorrectly, well, this is what everyone does, because they don't know any different. That's what happened in the environment they were raised in. And unless there's some intervention of information, where they learn, hey, no, they don't know. And it's like that with workplace abuse. I'm going to make a lot of analogies between workplace abuse and outside the workplace abuse, whether it's a domestic abuse or just sort of abuse that happens in our public society at large. And because they're incredibly similar. So I want to. That's all of that is to make my argument that this sort of people being incredulous, like harassment-free workplace, like it's not possible. Of course, that's like saying harassment-free family. Yeah, there's many. In fact, in most parts of the world, the majority of families where people aren't physically or sexually abused or emotionally abused. Yeah, and it's the same thing at work. So if you have the distortion that it's impossible to have a harassment-free workplace, it's not necessarily an inaccurate conclusion for you to make based on your life experience, but it's not accurate based on the totality of the overall shared societal experience, and it's not what's expected. Okay? So harassment-free workplace, in fact, is the norm. That doesn't mean that a harassment-free workplace doesn't have any work challenges. Of course, just like a domestic family will still have challenges. Just because you're not physically beating someone up or sexually assaulting someone or threatening to kill them doesn't mean that your family doesn't have challenges. You just have more regular challenges. So, who did their chores, and was there an issue where someone wasn't having a good day, or, something negative happened to the family, in terms of employment or illness or something. It's the same thing at work. Harassment-free workplaces aren't some perfect place where everybody sits around all the time, smiling and just sitting around blissful. Well, of course not. There's all kinds of challenges, right? If they're, a nonprofit, there are challenges in trying to achieve those goals. If they're a for-profit, they're the same types of challenges, whether it's business-related or if it's a delivery of some sort of service. So yeah, there's still a lot that you need to do. There's still going to be challenges and obstacles, but just because you don't have people physically assaulting and harassing people or sexually abusing people or emotionally or psychologically abusing or threatening people or bullying them, it doesn't mean that you don't have an exciting workplace. It just means that that's sort of the norm. And I really want to, again, underscore this. Harassment-free workplace should never be approached like harassment-free workplace. It should be approached like, yeah, harassment-free workplace. Just like I'm going to make the analogy in your domestic situation, you should never think harassment-free family. No, you should approach it as, yeah, harassment-free family. Again, not the blissful, not perfect, but nobody's physically or sexually or verbally or psychologically abusing or bullying people. That's normal. Okay, so that's the first part of the show title, right? That this exists, this is the norm, and this should be what you expect. Of course, our HR heroes already know this. Their question is, how do I create it? So this episode, we're just talking about how do you create it, because it's a totally different thing about how you maintain it, right? But how do you create this harassment-free workplace that I just spent some time arguing is normal, is expected, and is the norm, shall we say? The easy way to create it is that the leadership from the very top down of the organization absolutely have made the decision that there will be a harassment-free workplace, and then they create policies, procedures, and culture to ensure that happens. It's analogous, again, in my estimation, to a domestic unit, the family. How do you have a harassment-free family, right? I just said that it's not the norm or expected that there's physical violence or sexual violence or psychological abuse or violence in the family. How do you do that? Well, the leadership from the very top down, which would often is the parent or the parents or the legal guardians, whoever it is, that's the adult, that's at the very top, making decisions by themselves or together. They decide this will be a harassment-free family, right? We're not going to have any physical violence or sexual violence or abuse or psychological or emotional abuse or bullying. Okay, they make a decision, and then, like I just said, you create policies and a culture where that's exactly what's done. This isn't difficult. You just decide. The challenge is that the people at the very top have to make the decision, and they have to be in agreement. So if you had a family where one person who had the leadership role said, "Oh, I want to have an harassment-free family. I don't want anyone here to hit or kick or punch or assault each other. I don't want that to happen." But then the other person at the top says, "Well, I hear you, but I may get mad one day or have a bad day, or people might do things to make me angry, quote unquote, and then I'm going to have to just I can't. It's not my fault what happens." So you're not then going to get your committed workplace that's harassment-free because you don't have consensus on what the decision is. You just make the decision. And then you just go ahead and do that. We're not going to do the violence. This sounds incredibly oversimplified, but it actually is. And it also takes away and puts for another day the discussion of, if you ask most people, do you want to have a harassment-filled family or harassment-filled workplace, they'll tell you no. They'll say, I don't want people sexually harassing and physically abusing and psychologically and emotionally bullying. I don't want that to happen. That's not what I want. But if you watch their behavior, that's not what they're doing. And of course, we know, and we share in so many programs, that the behavior tells us everything we need to know. So words, I often say in a lot of education programs that words are meaningless. They're not totally meaningless. I mean, they could be indicators or clues for what's really going to happen, but they don't mean anything in terms of what somebody says and what somebody does necessarily matching. So if you want to have a harassment-free workplace, then all you have to do, the easy way, is just have leadership that makes the decision. We're going to have a harassment-free workplace, and then they just do it. They themselves don't harass. They don't let other people harass. So, again, family analogy, if you had parents or caregivers, guardians who said we're not going to have harassment in the home, and then maybe some of the children, right, started trying to threaten or try to begin to look like they're going to assault or beat each other up, then the parents or guardians would step in and, no, we're not going to do this. Like, we're not doing it as the adults. You don't see that ever happen with us, and we're not going to let you physically beat up somebody else or sexually assault someone or, verbally or psychologically do this. Now, that becomes a thing because in some families, the leaders will say things like, well, we're not doing it. We, the leaders, aren't harassing or abusing anyone, but kids will be kids, And if kids have sibling, rivalry, that's normal. Well, yeah, sibling rivalry, the idea that people, share everything from jealousy of how much time and affection and support other siblings get to insecurities and all, that's, of course, totally normal. It happens to all humans probably at some level. Sibling rivalry as a justification for people physically beating each other, breaking bones, drawing blood, sexually assaulting each other, emotionally or psychologically bullying and threatening each other. No. That's not kids will be kids or girls will be girls or boys will be boys or whatever you want us to call it. No. Now, if kids are out playing a game and somebody, hey, we were playing the game outside and then while they're playing, somebody falls and scrapes their knee and bleeds a little, well, yeah, okay, that's normal. But if somebody pushes somebody down and like tries to choke them, yeah, you have a problem. And I'm saying this because it's the same thing I see at work. So the HR hero who has made good decisions to join with an organization where the leaders have made the decision and their behavior conveys that they're going to have a harassment-free workplace, it's easy because the leaders aren't harassing anybody, and then the moment that anybody else does that, the leaders immediately say, no, you're not going to push down, push your peer, your work peer, which is somewhat analogous to sibling rivalry, down and physically assault them. You're not going to sexually assault somebody. You're not going to threaten to kill them or bully them. No. But you need, again, that decision from the top down with what we're going to do. If you have leadership that starts to make these excuses, well, it's just joking, or people are just horsing around, at work, it's analogous to that family where the leaders are saying, well, boys will be boys, girls will be girls. That's what I did when I was young. Really? You choked people, or you knocked their teeth out, or sexually assaulted them, or literally said you're going to kill them, locked them in a closet, or tortured them or something? No, I hope not. If so, then that's okay, but we again don't have a clear definition of what harassment-free is. Look, the weird thing about this whole issue of harassment-free, when you start looking at any part of the world and reading actual cases, what's really happened at work, whether it's a legal case or a business narrative of what happened, that's a serious case. Most of the time, it's so easy when you ask people, would you consider it to be harassment if somebody said, I've got a bullet with your name on it, and it's in my gun? Most people would say, well, yeah. If you had somebody who was at work and just went and, took off their clothes and showed their coworkers their genitals, and that was not part of their job, would you think that's harassment? People would say, well, yeah. Right? At work and at home. If you were at home and people, you have why is the adult at home, showing their genitals and making, comments about them, in front of their, children or extended group? That what? Why is someone, physically assaulting someone? Why would a parent say to a child, or let a child say to another child, I've got a bullet with your name on it? What? What I say by what I mean is these cases, when you look at the narratives of what happens, or the facts, if they're lawsuits, or the alleged facts, they're not difficult at all. I mean, most of the time you can just stop people randomly on the street in any city in the world and sort of let them read it, and they say, wow, this is not right. They don't need any kind of class for that. They don't need any kind of special training for that. You don't need any kind of, university degree or anything. It's just sort of like, no. You don't, choke people, or you don't, grab people's genitals. You don't, tell people that they're ugly and you wish they were dead. You don't, you don't do, these aren't things that are difficult for people to grasp as being offensive, unreasonable at home or at work. So I don't know, and I've shared many times that people fascinate me. And I do mean fascinate me. One of the things actually that does bring me some joy is the longer I live and I get to learn new things about what people do, I'm always interested, why did they do that? That's not a good outcome. Why did they do that? And this harassment situation at the workplace is just so simple. You don't need to have an employee handbook or a policy where you list, 750 pages of, don't spit at other people. Don't tell other people that you wish they were dead. Don't tell other people they're so ugly they should never leave the house. You don't need to list all of the different things that people do that are offensive, that are intended to cause harm, that are unreasonable, that are not at all related to the job. You don't need the list at work, and you don't need it at home. You don't really need to sit down. Leaders of domestic organizations or families don't need to sit down and say, okay, let's do a list of 750 things that you don't do. You don't bite other people. You don't punch them. You don't sexually assault them. You don't say to them, you're so ugly or you're so skinny, you should never leave your room. Everybody hates you. You should die. You don't need to list this because the list will be so long. That's why when I say 750, I'm not kidding. Like, you could just come up with, there's umpteen versions of this that you could come up with that are just all intended to do what? What are the words intended to do? The words are intended to be offensive. The words are intended to interfere with somebody's job. The words are intended to be intimidating or abusive or hostile. I mean, you don't need like a class on this, really, seriously. Because here's the deal. The people who are harassers, they know, they picked those words, right? This is the thing that I said fascinates me. And I even went back when I got my most recent graduate degree. I took so many psychology classes because I'm fascinated by this. People pick the words. And they pick them with the intent to intimidate, to create abuse, to have a hostile environment. You don't tell somebody that you wish they were dead or you have a bullet with their name on it, or the world would be better if they never left their room because they're so skinny or they're so fat or they're so ugly. There's not a single thing that there's a justification that's rational that you're going to say that you meant that in anything other than to intimidate or harass somebody. Now, the excuse people make is, oh, I was joking. Oh, okay. Well, here's the deal. Unless your job is that you are a performer, an entertainer, comedian, things of that nature, and it's part of your job to say that, like it's a line in a script or part of your performance, then it would make total sense that you were joking and or that it was part of your job. Other than that, when you're at work, other people are at work, then if your joke that you think is funny is about, harm or shock or potential abuse, then you need to be quiet and not say it. I do a lot of programs, and we're going to do some other shows, and I'm putting together some more in-depth global education programs for everyone. So always come to CourtneyAnderson.com so you can sort of see what we're rolling out. But the idea is this. Look, there's so much that people do on these training issues in the area of harassment. I myself, I couldn't even count. I actually have tried at some point. I look back, over the last, 15 years of doing corporate education and training programs, and over the last 17 years of being a lawyer and taking cases like about harassment, representing employees. I represent employees most of the time on those cases, and then, of course, I represent clients and the organization, the employer, when I'm there with corporate education. So I see both sides. I work with both sides. I serve both sides professionally. This is so easy. Is it? If it's not part of your job, don't do it. Now, it's actually easier at work to create a harassment-free workplace because the rule is really simple. Is it part of your job? And you actually have at work, hopefully somewhere written down or at least told you, what is your job? Are you a bus driver? Okay. Well, then if your job is to drive the bus, then everything about that is your job. All this other stuff about, quote, I don't care if you call it a joke. I don't care about what you try to label it. But if you're threatening somebody, telling them that they should, they'll die alone, that they're so, ugly, no wonder they're not married, no wonder they've been divorced 4 times, whatever it is that you're saying, that's not part of bus driving, don't do it. Now, there's a whole bunch of training programs and education that has all these other things. You teach people, well, if you wouldn't say it in front of your grandma, don't say it at work. Well, that's totally useless. Or if you wouldn't say it in front of your mom or your dad or your sister or something, that's useless because a lot of people, like I've said from the beginning of this episode, come from families where people say and do that. That's where they learned it. Where do you think somebody learns a lot of this behavior? Now, you do get people who come from environments where there's none of it. No physical abuse, no sexual abuse, no verbal abuse, or any psychological abuse, and on their own they just start doing it. It does happen, but it's rare. The majority of the times when you have somebody that's doing this, it's because they've learned it somewhere, and they usually learned it at home. And it may have been grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, sister, whatever, so you can't give them a tool and advice and say, if you wouldn't say it in front of your family, don't say it here, because that's where they said it. That's where they learned it. Their mom's the one that said, I have a bullet with your name on it. And that's why they say it at work, because that's what they learned. So that's not helpful to them. You must help people understand that to be safe, just do your work stuff. If you're not really sure, if it's not about work and you're thinking, I don't know, should I make that joke about, the size of my genitals? If you're not sure, don't do it. Those are basically the rules that I do. I mean, I do lots of examples. I walk people through all different types of situations. But the bottom line for an HR hero is you have to be in an organization where the leadership from the top all the way through every layer of leadership is equally committed to harassment-free workplace. If there's somebody in the leadership chain that isn't committed, then it won't work. And the HR hero is unable to create a harassment-free workplace because the leader doesn't want that. They either think it's funny or interesting, or they like it when somebody, tells somebody, oh, I was so happy when I heard, that you were sick. Those were the best days of my job ever because you weren't here. And now you're here and I'm sick. Ha, ha, ha. You get a lot of the people in leadership positions who will say that they themselves, like to joke around. They think it's funny and all this kind of stuff. These are just all excuses for, I don't want a harassment-free workplace and I like harassment. An HR hero cannot function in that environment. You're just unable because the HR hero's job is to have a harassment-free workplace because that's actually required in most parts of the world, many parts of the world, by law. And forget that. It's just ethically, ethics are higher than law. What we should do, not law is what we must do, ethics are what we should do. It just seems like, most of us, like I said, if you ask people on the street, hey, somebody said to you, you're so ugly, you should die. Would you think that's offensive? Most people, these things aren't difficult. You don't need a class. That's how HR feels. And it's impossible to make a harassment-free workplace when the leadership isn't committed. Or somebody in there, or maybe many people, you just need one or more people not committed to harassment-free workplace means you're going to have harassment. And it's going to be almost impossible for HR to really deal with it because you're not all on the same team. Right? So it's, again, back to my analogy I made earlier. If you have two, parents or legal guardians in a home, and one of them is, saying all the time, oh, we need to have a harassment-free workplace, and then the other one's like, yeah, we need to have it, and then they're going around and saying to the kids, but if it was up to me, I'd choke you. I want your eyes to come out of their sockets because sometimes I hate you so much. Okay, their behavior is that they're harassing, so the other parent sitting around talking about they want a harassment-free workplace is not working. You got to commit to this, and then everybody has to be on the same page. So the easy way to have the harassment-free workplace is to be in a place where, from the top down, that's what everybody else wants. If it's not, then our HR heroes, and in total honesty, this is what I share with organizations around the world. The HR hero long-term will not stay in an organization that is not committed to a harassment-free workplace because they can't do their job. And most people are just so, repulsed by these things. The behavior is just awful. Nobody wants to be around that. And if an HR hero witnesses it and understands they're in a place where they can't stop it because the leadership at some level has decided they want it, then they just at some point are going to leave. And that's a sad thing, but it's the truth. So here we are, wrapping up this show. As always, you can come to CourtneyAnderson.com and be part of our community. Again, I just want to encourage you to leave this episode thinking harassment-free workplace and understand, no, harassment-free workplace. It's normal. It's what's expected, all right? And the easy way to create one, you just got to be around other people who want the same thing. But just like that analogy, you got one parent or caregiver, a legal guardian who's like, yeah, I want a harassment-free workplace. The other one's like, I do too. But then one of them is going, around and either themselves threatening or abusing or letting the other family members threaten and abuse other people, then you don't have that. And it's impossible. It's not happening. They may be saying it, but it's not happening. And one person by themselves can't fix it unless the other person decides to change and become committed to that. So thank you for joining me. As always, I appreciate it.